G'day, I'm Stephen Page from Page, Provan Family and Fertility Lawyers, and today I'm talking about importing and exporting eggs, sperm and embryos into and out of Australia. Australia is a large country, at least in terms of land area, but a small country in terms of population, and we're greatly spread out. We also have 8 different units, in the sense we've got 6 states, 2 territories. And why that's relevant to the import and export of eggs, sperm and embryos is that there are different rules in every place. In much of the country, namely everywhere other than Victoria and Western Australia, there are clear rules about import and export. And they are to comply with state legislation where that applies, and particularly Queensland, New South Wales, ACT, South Australia. Namely, for export, there's got to be written consent of the gamete provider. Sorry, not in South Australia, but in Queensland, New South Wales, ACT. And elsewhere, in Northern Territory, South Australia, Tasmania, is to comply with the National Health and Medical Research Council ethical guidelines. The full title is, believe it or not, Ethical Guidelines on the Use of Assisted Reproductive Technology in Clinical Practice and Research 2023. It's rather sad that I know the whole title, but there you go. So for those places, when you import, there are requirements to comply with Australian requirements, namely it's got to be an altruistic donation, and Australian counselling requirements have to be met, and the preparedness to be open with the donor-conceived individual conceived from this process when they turn 16 or 18 or whatever the local rules are. Generally it's 18, but in Queensland it's 16, ACT is currently 16 or can be younger if there's satisfaction about maturity. And there's got to be a reaching of family limits, and in a separate video I talk about what the family limits are in Australia, and they vary state by state. Western Australia and Victoria stand on their own. Western Australia requires the consent for donor gametes, so donor eggs and sperm, or embryos from donor eggs and sperm, to only be imported or exported into and out of Western Australia with the consent of the Reproductive Technology Council of Western Australia. Whether that still remains the case, let's see what happens after the next state election due in March 2025. But for the moment at least, RTC approval is required, and the family limit in Western Australia is the lowest in the land, which I talk about in the family limits video. In Victoria, the requirement has been to obtain VARTA approval, Victorian Assisted Reproductive Treatment Authority, and they have there's been certain requirements under the law. VARTA, for example, said following the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February a couple of years ago, don't import eggs from Ukraine. Well, as you'll hear in my video about the changes in Victoria, VARTA's gone to be replaced by the Department of Health, and now clinics have to self-certify. So we'll see how that makes a change. And finally, if there is an export of eggs, sperm or embryos, and it's for the purposes of commercial surrogacy, the code of practice laid down by the Fertility Society of Australia and New Zealand. Now, I'm the Secretary of the Fertility Society. I'm not speaking in that capacity, but I'm just looking at the code of practice. Says to every IVF clinic in Australia, do not export for the purposes of commercial surrogacy. So that's a very brief guide. Obviously the law is more expensive. If you want to know more about it, get in contact with me, but otherwise that's the snapshot. Stephen Page from Page, Provan Family and Fertility Lawyers, thank you for watching and listening.